Okay.
Be serious.
We're live.
I will be serious. Hey, hi everyone.
You just told everyone you'd be serious, so we're ready.
That was the joke, obviously.
The only one.
Yes, you have to start funny and then. So, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Angular World Tour, for making a stop in our Vienna meetup group. Thank you so much. And my name is Luba, and I will be your host today. I would like to say thank you, the Stat Labs and Pushbase.org for organizing this event. Thank you so much. We would like to know where you guys are from, so leave that in the chat, please. Also, if you have questions, you could leave that in the chat as well. We will get back to you at the end of the talk. And without further ado, I would like to start by welcoming our three amazing speakers. We have Madlena from Angular core team. Then we have Tracy, the founder of this.lab and the organizer of the Angular World Tour. And we have Michael, the founder of Pushbase.io and the organizer of Angular Vienna meetup group. Our first speaker is Madlena. I would like to pass the mic to you. And with her State of Angular talk, she will give us the latest update about the upcoming releases, recent milestones, and community initiatives. So the stage is all yours, Madlena.
Thank you, Luba. I'm excited to join you guys today, and welcome to everyone who I haven't met yet. I'm Madlena Scheidegger. I'm the engineering manager for the Angular team here in Mountain View in sunny California. I think some of you might have seen some of this content already, but it's always good to just make sure we go through all of it and make sure that everybody's aware of all of the things we've been up to and of the upcoming things. With that, we always want to start with what's new in Angular and what we've been working on. First one is just reminding everybody again that we do have an extended diagnostic that we've launched in 13.2. We're excited about this as a way of giving you guys more opportunities, or rather giving you guys early heads up for items that might be not going as well as you might expect, or where you make slight mistakes while they're not hard checks. They're always good to know. For example, here on the slide, you can see the very popular banana in a box where we just inverted the wrong braces around, and while you might mean that, you probably don't. And so this is why it's just a little bit of a hint rather than an actual hard linter error. The other one that we've launched already is unnecessary null crossing, a warning when you use the two question marks in a row of making sure that is actually what you meant to do. We do expect that we are able to extend this as well. And if you're at all interested in helping out with this, we do have some ideas up on GitHub on other checks that we would love to add, and always looking forward to having people help us add those checks as well. Accessibility is always a topic that I care a lot about, and very excited to have us continue to work very hard on improving it. We've launched a lot of accessibility improvements with 13 and 13.1 and 13.2 on a lot of our components. We're continuing that work, and we'll have more launching in 14 as well. Most notably, we've been doing a lot of work on date and time picker, and so hopefully that will show huge improvements as we go closer to 14. In addition to that, we've also been working to continue in other aspects of this around click components and mouse events, and making sure we more accurately respond to these and give you the hints and allow you to build great products with it. Another feature we're excited that is launching with 14 is that we're now going to be able to allow you to change the page title in the router. This is something that's been long desired, and it's also going to be a huge improvement for everybody to have it built in and be able to accurately reflect the content of your page in the title and not just have it be updated after the fact. Beyond that, we're going to continue, as I said already, daytime. We'll continue with other aspects as well, and continue as well with high contrast and dark mode, and just generally always keeping an eye on accessibility and making it easy to build great products with that in mind. Another feature I know all of you guys are super excited to hear about, and we're eagerly awaiting landing, is type forms. We did the RFC in December. We got a lot of great feedback, and I always appreciate everybody who's participating in that and giving us feedback. Since then, what we've done is finishing the implementation, but then also working with our internal code base in order to make sure that it will land well and that we've taken care of all of the edge cases. We always discover a few more things in that, and that was the case here too. And so there was a few small tweaks to the design. However, at this point in time, we were super close to being able to land it, and hopefully we'll actually land successfully in the next week or two. If you want to keep an eye out on it, you might actually start seeing the PRs going out very soon, and that means then it will be going live in 14. So keep an eye out for that, especially also how you can then migrate your forms to actually take advantage of this new feature of making sure they're typed and more solid through that. The other feature I know everybody is eyeing and taking a look at is standalone components. We've done a lot of work with that as well. We had the original RFC earlier in this year as well. Great feedback again there too. We've continued with the implementation, and just 6 days ago we launched a new RFC as well, because now that we've done the basic implementation of the components, or how standalone components is working, we also needed to figure out how we're going to make this work in various APIs. And the RFC goes through how it will show up in bootstrapping an application, routing and lazy loading, dynamically instantiating a component, and providing lifecycle hooks for initializing logic. So if you're at all interested in how standalone components are going to show up in this way, or you're interested in how it's going to show up in these APIs, you want to make sure we take care of the use case, take a look at the RFC, give us feedback, and make sure it continues to work for us. We're not quite sure yet when we're going to land this exactly, but we hope that it will be very soon as well. And so we'll keep you guys updated as we know more on when it is actually going to land. Oh, the other thing we did on last week on Friday is we did a Twitter space on this. And hopefully some of you were able to join in on the conversation and listen in as Pavel and Alex and Andrew Kushner were discussing type forms. We've also, beyond a lot of these changes that we were just talking about, were a lot in the frameworks. Accessibility was across the board, but here's also some things we've been working on components. We've been trying to make some of our CDK components be promoted to stable. The 4 we've been working on are menu, combo box, list box, and dialog. Again, we're not quite sure yet which ones are going to land in 14, but we're hoping at least 2 out of these 4 will be part of 14, and then the others will shortly follow in following updates beyond that. Hopefully, this will also make you guys easier to build some of the components out of CDK ones. Last things we wanted to mention, we've mostly wrapped up the work for augmenting injectors for embedded views. We're excited about adding this feature as a quality of life improvement for some of the frameworks, especially if we're building components. I know our own components team is excited to be able to use that as they're building their components. The other thing we've started doing is working with the Aurora team. This is, if you're not familiar with Aurora, they're a team out of the Chrome SDK, Chrome team, working on augmenting frameworks in order to help make sure that best practices are built in, especially around performance. They've done a lot of work with around image components, and this is where we're also going to start our relationship, or one of our joint projects coming up is working on an improved image performance component for Angular. It should help making sure that we end up having, sorry, it's very tiny on my screen there, so I need to look at the larger diagram somewhere else. It should help make sure that it does all of the best practices for images, such as making sure it gets lazy loaded afterwards. You have image sizing, you have the right compression algorithm, just to make sure that that is not one of the reasons why your app is performing a little slower than it should be. And with that, that was actually most of them. We also have actually updated our roadmap in the last 2-3 weeks. So if you haven't taken a look at it, you can get a sense of both some of the work I've just talked about, but also some of the work that we're thinking of doing into the next year. And I know this was a little bit of whirlwind and fast, but hopefully it will still be useful. And with that, I'll pass it back to Luba.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Martina. And without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Tracy, who will provide us with a quick starter guide on how to get involved in open source. So, Tracy,
Cool.
mic is yours.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see some Angular events coming in person as well. It's so cool to see so many people joining. I see some familiar faces. So I feel bad because Lars, I feel like you've heard this talk like 10 times already. So I definitely, for your sake, need to like refresh talk. But I love giving this talk, especially to local meetups, because I think all of us who are in different countries are really excited about open source, excited about being a part of the Angular community. And, you know, I really hope that this talk helps inspire you all in Angular Vienna to like start contributing to open source. We really, really, really need more people within our Angular community. It's a really, really great place to be. And, you know, some people in the chat, like Lars, for example, are just like amazing people to get to know and meet at conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll go ahead and get started. All right. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and, okay, there we go. So this is a question we get a lot, right? I mean, I'm sure you all are doing Angular and looking at different ways that you know, how do I get more involved in contributing to Angular and be more a part of the Angular community? There's amazing ways to do that. And there's also so many different ways to do so. So hopefully this gives you like a little bit of an example on what you could potentially do to start contributing to Angular and other adjacent frameworks today. Like Luba said, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm the CEO of a company called This.Labs. I'm also on the RxJS core team. So if some of your PRs are sitting there, maybe you're trying to help update the documentation and you need a little push from the team, feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm always happy to chat. I'm also a GDE for Angular, Microsoft MVP, recently became a GitHub star, and just, again, love community-related things. So always feel free to just message me. Also get to work with some amazing clients. So really, really, really do love the work we do here at This Dot. We're about a 50% consultancy, and we're hiring. So I always say that this is how I make friends. So feel free to email me anytime, Tracy at This Dot. If you are looking, we are 100% remote company, and you know, and would love to work with you. Okay, so going back to contributing to open source, today I want to talk a little bit about how I got started, so you guys can see it's not scary, and then maybe we'll talk about why you might want to contribute to open source. Then we'll talk about how, based on why, and then we'll talk about a little bit of do's and don'ts. So I started off in open source by going to a bootcamp and getting really excited about JavaScript. I decided I wanted to meet the community. I started getting involved, and, you know, again, kind of led me to where I am today, right? So the first thing I did was just start getting to know people. So finding people on Twitter, right? Like Madalena and Michael and myself are all on Twitter. Lars as well on Twitter. You know, if everybody wants to post their Twitter handles, we can all follow each other. That would be great too. But yeah, I just started seeing like who's talking about Angular, who's going to Angular conferences, you know, what's going on in the community. And then the second thing I did was start to share and just educate myself, right? So I was learning a lot in Angular. This was kind of when things were in alpha and beta, and I was just sharing my experience on, hey, what was I doing? What was I trying to do? You know, there's a lot of new and exciting things happening in the Angular community now. So blogging about those things, some of the things that Madalena spoke about, for example, would be a really, really amazing way to share and educate the community. So that's what I did. And the, you know, Angular community said, oh, hey, you're interested in the stuff we're interested in too, right? And that helped me become a valued member of the community. The third thing I did was meet maintainers. So I think it's really important if you're trying to get into open source to just know people, right? So again, you know, coming to this meetup, you met myself, Madalena, Michael, Luba as well, Lars, because he's hanging out in the chat, right? Meeting people who are doing this already is a really, really important thing to do, because it makes it a lot easier for you to contribute generally. And then the last thing I did was, after I just kind of got to know everybody, started blogging, started getting to know, you know, going to meetups and conferences and things like that, I just kept a lookout on where help was needed, right? It might not be so apparent at first, but, you know, my friends were part of the RxJS core team. I saw they really, really needed help with documentation. So I just said, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to form a team and we're just going to hop on it. And that was how it started. So, I literally created like an empty Angular repo and said, hey, here's the docs repo, let's go. And the community really took over from there, and we formed a team, and it was just really amazing. And I think from that, I became part of the RxJS core team after contributing for quite some time, and a lot of people who were helping contribute to the documentation and were being consistent in that area, we invited to become a part of the RxJS core team as well. So it's that easy. So let's talk about your why and your how. Thank you so much, people, for saying hi. I see 2 other people that are saying hi from Vienna. So when you talk about contributing to open source, you should definitely ask yourself, why do you want to contribute? Is it functional? Is it aspirational? There's kind of 2 ways to think about this. One is functional. Maybe you're at work and you need to use Angular on a project, right? So this would be like a very functional reason why you want to contribute back to Angular, because you need to fix something that's not working for you. The second thing would be to build a career through open source. This is a great way to increase your knowledge within a technology, get a new job, build a career. That's also another really amazing way. If you're talking about the functional approach, I would say the first thing you want to do, let's say you're working on a large Angular project, you need help, you're going to need help in the future potentially. The best thing to do is start giving back before you ask. So, while you're hanging out, before you need help, look for ways you can contribute. Is it documentation? Is it helping answer issues? Is it helping reproduce bugs? There's so many just very easy ways you can do things. The second thing you want to do is, before you actually want something changed, definitely asking for feedback. There's a lot in open source that goes on behind closed doors, and, you might really want a feature, but maybe the core team has already talked about it and decided against making this change. Or maybe work is already being planned or is being worked on privately, right? You don't want to waste your time and, spend weeks or days kind of trying to do something because you think that, let's say, Angular, NGRX, or NX, or Angular Material, or whatever needs something. You definitely want to submit an issue, ask for feedback, and see if it's something that you should work on, or, maybe you shouldn't. I think a third thing is making sure you're finding maintainers in other forums. GitHub notifications is very noisy. GitHub issues is very noisy. And, unfortunately, there's only so much time in open source. So sending a personal message and saying like, hey, like, for example, if you're trying to fix something in RxJS, you could say, hey, I saw you at Angular Vienna. By the way, do you think you could help me with this PR? And I'll say, sure, why not? Thanks for coming to my talk, right? That is a really great way, again, to just build relationships and find maintainers in other forums. Again, notifications on GitHub is just very noisy, and people aren't ignoring you because they're ignoring you. They might just have not seen it. The fourth thing to do is make sure you're building genuine relationships. Contacting somebody to say like, hi, I'm trying to be helpful, versus like, hey, can you help me? Like, if I was like, ooh, Lars can make me famous, I'm going to talk to him, but only because he's going to make me famous. Like, Lars is probably going to be like, ew, Tracy, go away. I can feel your fakeness. So don't build relationships just because you need to self-serve your needs. Like, people can see right through that, and typically they don't love it. So the second way to kind of get involved in open source is maybe aspirational. So I think aspirational is pretty amazing because you don't have to be stuck to a specific technology or framework. You can kind of ask yourself, do I like this team? Can I be a successful contributor? Looking at the different issues, looking at the request for comments and seeing, hey, is this a place where I want to be? Looking at the PRs, asking yourself, do I like how they're responding to things? Like, can I actually be useful here? So I think that's really amazing. Second thing, again, is kind of solving problems that maintainers want, right? You always want to look at what the backlog looks like, the issues look like. Sometimes there's a roadmap that's available. There's a lot of different ways, again, to kind of like start conversation and figure out what maintainers want. So the third thing is to make sure to help with the documentation. Any maintainer is going to say, please help with the docs. In RxJS right now, we don't have time to update the documentation to the latest version, right? It's not that out of date, but like some things are out of date. So helping with the documentation, again, is a very, very great way to get started and be super helpful. And because there's not a lot of people that do help with the documentation, it is actually the most appreciated. So help with that. And, you know, you'd be surprised that, you know, a lot of stories you hear out there of people who, you know, we think are, you know, amazing within the JavaScript world, they all started with documentation. The last thing you want to do, especially from an aspirational perspective, is making sure you're educating and sharing while you're learning and doing things. There's so many people within the Angular community, if I can think of, that maybe didn't make like significant contributions to the Angular code base, but they are the most amazing people and like so valuable within our community. Deborah Carrata, for example, you know, she didn't like write Angular CLI, but I mean, she is one of the foremost educators within our community, helping educate and share, right? Michael, you know, he is not making like significant contributions to like the ArcJS repo, for example, but he is one of the biggest educators out there. And so that's amazing, like educating and sharing and helping. You don't have to contribute code to actually contribute to open source. The last thing I want to touch on is just do's and don'ts. So very important when you're joining the community to make sure that you are having compassion and you're treating maintainers like people. You're being very professional, assuming the best of intentions, and making sure you're abiding by the code of conduct. Even if there isn't one in place, you know, typically like just following general guidelines of being nice is very important. You know, open source, even though you might not be working with people on a, you know, you're not employed by the same company, everybody expects you to be professional and have professional etiquette within a community. Another thing is making sure you don't act or be entitled, right? Again, people are busy and, you know, you've just got to be nice and patient and don't think you're a maintainer's biggest priority, you know, like for example, on the RxJS team, nobody's getting paid to do it full time. So it's hard because, you know, we all have full-time jobs, then we have a full-time job in open source. And then, you know, there's family, there's kids, like there's a million things happening. So just because somebody's not responding to your issue doesn't mean that they're ignoring you. It's just that they're super busy. Don't be annoying either. Make sure to follow up within reason, but like don't email somebody 10 times a day about an issue. Also, don't complain, right? Like everything is, you know, you're getting everything for free. So if you don't like it, go use a different library, for example. Lars does also bring up a good point in the comments that organizing is also a great way to contribute to open source. There's so many amazing Angular meetups. And, you know, I see some people who are not from Vienna. So like, you know, do we have an Angular Jamaica? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. Anyways, yeah, contributing to those types of things is really amazing as well. Mugatu, I don't know what your question is. Do they pay something? But if you clarify, I'm happy to answer that question. So I hope this talk was useful to you all. You know, I love talking about my journey. I love helping people along. I love seeing new faces within the community. And, you know, if you want to chat, feel free. But I hope this just like helps you all get inspired to just get started. You know, I mean, you're all working on Angular, I'm assuming, since you're at an Angular meetup. So, you know, it's really easy to just say, hey, you know what, they're like maybe the Stack Blitz example is out of date for some reason. Let me go and update it. Oh, here's a typo here. Those types of things are so valuable and just help get your feet wet and are very, very, very much appreciated. So help with those. You know, again, we are 100% remote and worldwide. So we are hiring in Vienna and everywhere else. So feel free to email me, Tracy@this.dot, and I'm always happy to chat. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we did this.
Thank you, Tracy.
Of course.
And last but not least, I would like to pass the mic to Michael with his performance and scale talk. Mic to Michael. You will.
Hey.
I love that. Pass the mic to Michael.
Yeah.
To use this next.
Sad that there is no karaoke machine here. Otherwise,
We'll save it for next time, for next
Yeah,
meetup, I guess.
definitely. Next in-person meetup, we do karaoke.
I guess that's a requirement from now on.
Yeah, definitely.
So the stage is all yours. But I will introduce the talk. Wait. So his performance at scale talk, you will expand your knowledge of performance optimization techniques. And now the stage is all yours, Michael. Please.
Thanks for that amazing introduction. I will share my screen. I guess this is what we do here. Okay. You should see my slides. Is this the case?
Yes, we do.
So, okay, then I will start. I don't click the share button. Normally, I always click the share button on my slides. Now I will click the present button. Welcome, everybody. Finally, another Angular Vienna event again, and I hope in the future we can do way more. Let's directly start with my talk. The title is Performance at Scale, High-Speed Web Applications on Any Device. And here the important part is scale and any device, because Angular for sure is pretty fast. If you create a small app, you know from measures that change detection, for example, is faster than virtual DOM. But at scale, the problems are different, and on different devices, the problems are different. So the talk here should give you, let's say, the best low-hanging fruits and a good concept on what you can do to speed up your applications on any device. How did I start all that stuff on performance? So there is the project called Aurora, focusing on helping all the open source libraries that are heavily used to increase their performance. It was initialized by Eddie Osmani from the Chrome team. And as you know, I'm a very big fan of Angular. So Minko is the part in Angular that was focusing on performance. And he asked me to help him to create or increase the performance of an application, of the so-called movie application. This is basically an open source database about movies. And this application that you see here right in the middle is an identical clone of a React application. And what we did basically is we took over the old app with a not really good score and bumped it up to a pretty nice score. And the whole talk will show you how this goes. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cough. Yeah, so how does it go? We need a little bit of basic information, and we need flame charts. So this stuff here that you see is a picture of a flame chart. It's a screenshot from the Bootstrap of my application, from bootstrapping this movie application. As you can see, right in the middle, there is a huge blocking task, and the rest of the application is also quite huge. And this is just the worst part of that stuff here. So we will learn how to improve that. And by doing this, we should understand the principles and the theory first. So what you see here is frame drops highlighted in the flame chart. And we have at first the long task API. This API helps us to identify every task that took longer than 50 milliseconds. And then we have also a couple of other places in this view where we can see an overview and additional information to blocking tasks. For example, here in this overview panel at the top, we see the small red bars that hint us. We have the frame rate hinted with the green bar. And at the very bottom, we see the total blocking time, a summary of all the long tasks. And the goal is to get rid of this. And you can get rid of work in 3 different ways. You just don't do it. you do it in pieces, and you do the most important part first, which is prioritization. So let's have, before we talk about how to deal with the tasks, let's take a closer look in a task. So here, this is one task that is blocking. We have yellow scripting work, purple layout, and recalculate styles work, and green paint and composite work. And then we have this red area that basically marks a long task. So how you can deal with that? Scheduling is a core concept. And what we see in this very loaded diagram is that we have a click listener on the very left. And normally I would perform this block here in the middle, right in the click listener, and this would cause this very long task here. And what I do is I basically say, I don't do it now. I schedule that task to a different place in the future. And therefore, I have now more time to give the user interaction earlier and also reduce the total blocking time. So here we solve two different problems. We don't get rid of the work, but we chunk it up and we do the most important stuff first. As this is a lot of complicated stuff, I guess we need a little bit more time to understand it and to solve it. I will help you to do that. My name is Michael. As Luba introduced already, my company Push-Based.io, we are happy to sponsor and organize this and every other meetup in the future. For now, there will be way more free beer than in the past, and I'm very happy to serve that to the community. But that's it for me from my end. Let's go back to Angular and talk about the fundamentals in Angular change detection. What we see here is a component tree. At the very top, we have the application reference, and then we have the application component, the app component, and then we have all other components, our lists, our tiles, and this is basically what Angular renders, a tree structure of DOM elements. And to understand change detection, I give you some visual system. Let's say only the green square is an already rendered component. A yellow square means a rendered component, but it was not really necessary to render this component. And the green square with a red triangle, a delta sign, is they received an update. There is a difference from before. Updated path. Yeah. So if we, please ignore the hidden things here, the animation is broken and I didn't fix it. But if we introduce a change and we want to update this very small area to here, and I click the button, then Angular basically performs dirty marking, and it marks all components from the very bottom to the top as dirty. If this is done, Zone.js kicks in and calls application ref tick, and application ref tick is an Angular function that basically re-evaluates and re-renders every single component in the application. And now finally, also the graphic looks a little bit nicer. And we see that now we re-rendered, even if we want to update only this small square here, the full application, which is not really good. Everything that is yellow is unnecessary re-rendered and re-evaluated, and only the green part was the real update. So you can see we do quite some unnecessary work. Angular has a first solution from the beginning. They shipped change detection strategies, and there was one change detection strategy next to the default one that is called on push. And there is the general assumption on push, and the async pipe everywhere makes your app fast. So let me disprove it. Let me show you it makes it a little bit faster, but let me show you how slow it still is. Okay. So we have still the green square already rendered. We have a light green square with a gray triangle. On push change detection is applied to that component with the triangle, and the color means there was no evaluation. The black color means there was an evaluation, but no change was detected, and red means there was an evaluation and a change was detected, or it is the dirty marking from before that we already know. With that in mind, and a triangle everywhere on every square means every single component has change detection strategy on push. I run the whole thing again. I click the button, I introduce the change, Angular performs dirty marking from bottom to top, zone kicks in, calls application ref tip from Angular, and Angular starts to re-render from top to bottom. But as we can see now, the triangles that are not on the dirty path, they are colored black now, which means they don't have a change received through their input bindings, and therefore we don't need to re-evaluate it. And it looks already way better. But believe me, at scale, things are different. And in a real life application, it is still super slow. Look at the yellow. There is so much yellow. And the only thing that I want to update is this green square. So not really good, but a first good step. So turn on change detection and push in all of your components, and you will have some benefits. The next quick thing that we can do is we have a quick look on the network analysis tab. We click, we open the DevTools, we click on that network tab, and then we see the waterfall that gives us a visual representation of all the different network requests, when they started, when they ended, how long the connection time was, how much data they shipped, and so on and so forth. And this is very useful to figure out specific things. For example, if I hover over one of those tiles, I can see the connection time, and this helps me to later on apply some Preconnect tricks. I can see if there are queued or chained requests, and this helps me to later on optimize those chained requests and parallelize them. And I can also see the priority of all the requests. And as you know, I can use that priority, I mentioned it before, to do the most important part first. Good. There's another one at the very top. That's the opposite. At the very bottom left, you see 72 requests. I'm dyslexic. Are fired. This is a quick overview of how much in number, the count of all the requests, and next to it, you see the megabytes. Good. Network tab. So what can we do with that network tab, and what can we improve? The connection time. I can have a look, I can filter out all different domains, and then I basically add a Preconnect tag to my index.html, and this helps me, if you look at the orange stuff, to run the connection to all the important domains at the very beginning in parallel, and later on, when I really want stuff, when I really request data from them, I'm already connected and I'm way faster. The second thing is that I have render blocking resources, and sometimes if I'm not careful enough, it looks like at the top. I execute some script, I fetch some B, I fetch some A, and then I render the image. But rendering the image could be done first, because I neither need fetch A or B for the image, nor do I need to execute any script to display that image. So what we can do is we can apply the defer tag, and we can say that we should preload or prefetch those scripts, and they basically give me a higher or not so high priority. I can defer the execution to make it not static, not eagerly executed. I can preload stuff that is at the moment not visible, but at the bottom of the page, maybe, or maybe later on this page, and I can prefetch stuff that is maybe later after a navigation. And this helps me to get the most important stuff first. And then, of course, I have lazy loading, and I have lazy loading not in Angular, but I have lazy loading in the browser natively. And every feature I can use natively from the browser is the fastest and will have the best impact. So let's learn a little bit about that. I have the loading lazy attribute, the loading attribute with the value lazy, and I can apply that for images and for iframes at the moment. I'll open an issue, and maybe in the future we will receive that one also for SVGs. Would be really cool. Let's see what their opinion is on that request, but I can use that to basically only fetch images and only fetch the data for an iframe if they are not visible and if they are close to the viewport, right? Because even if they are not visible, if they are very close to the viewport, I would fetch them. So this means lazy loading. And as this is a lot of theory, I guess we should look at the code for a little bit, and I show you one of my small changes that I did. First of all, I will make sure that the screen size is properly for this presentation. So I open up the index and I zoom in a little bit. And we see that I use a Preconnect tag here. We see that I preload an image, that I prefetch another image. And we also see that I statically, the opposite of lazily loading that stuff or prefetching, I statically inline blocking styles. This is because the image down here should be positioned in the middle at the very beginning. So this was the stuff with preloading, prefetching, and Preconnect. Now let's jump into the list. Maybe I jump first in the browser because I realized you don't even know how it looks, the whole application. So let me first see if I can get that app open. So this is the movies app, right? And this is a list here. And now I jump back to the list, right to the list. And what I can do with this list here, I have this image and I could apply loading, but lazy, and I'm pretty sure you saw that already. And people just put that everywhere, and that's not really good, because if you put lazy loading on your largest contentful paint, it will maybe delay a little bit. So what I suggest is, in the hero section, just don't put it. And if you render a list, use in your RX4, now I will scroll up, use the index value, and then you can decide. And here I did it. Let me zoom in even more for you. I said the attribute loading will have the value lazy only if it is the second image. Or here I could do the first row, right? The first 4 images will have loading lazy, and then will have loading eager, so no lazy loading, and then the rest will have. And this is a very cool trick to basically dynamically optimize the largest contentful paint, because obviously one of those images is the largest contentful paint, and we don't want to lazy load that. Another thing that you can do is you can lazy load iframes. I will jump into another view here and I will show you another real life example. I can, of course, first show you that stuff in the demo. I click on a video and here is the trailer, and then a video starts, right? This is what we want to analyze. And if I zoom in, I have this attribute loading lazy here. And this will basically, if the stuff is in the viewport, load it, but with a lower priority. And if it is not in the viewport, it will not load it at all. An additional trick, because this button and this thing is always in the viewport, could be to use an ng if tag. I will basically use an observable that tells me if somebody clicks the button or not. And with this small trick here, I will display the iframe only if somebody clicks the button. Otherwise, I will never, not even lazily, fetch that iframe. And this looks trivial, but it is a huge improvement, because imagine that iframe is basically fetching whole YouTube in parallel. And I really only, not even lazily, I only want to fetch that stuff if the user requests it. As you saw before, I can easily click the button, it pops up, and nobody really knows that I don't lazy load it, but just really display that stuff when the button is clicked. So that are just some small tweaks that I guess could polish your already existing improvements. And now I will get nervous and fix it. So let me quickly delete that. So good enough. Now let me go back. Good. I told you that I don't want to lazy load all of the images, because some of the images are contained in the largest, or are the largest contentful paint. And in this application, it is definitely the case. Also a reason why we picked it, or why the Chrome team or Eddie's research picked it, is especially therefore. So I thought, okay, what else can I do? I can basically eager load the hero image. I now have the trick with a list that I can eagerly load the first, second, or the first row of all those images and all the other images lazily. But by most of the, most of all of our applications, especially React applications, but a lot of Angular applications do, fetch the data in the component, or let's say the trigger fetching that data in the component, right? You use the HTTP request in the component, and like React was years driven by that architecture. In Angular, we have dependency injection. It is not that easy to come up with that architecture from scratch, but still a lot of people initially fetch the data when they end up in the component. And this looks like this. I have a dynamic menu at the sidebar here, and I have all my data in the main content. And as you look here in the network tab, the side nav is, it looks like, earlier in bootstrapping because we have it more to the left, and the main content is a little bit later because this DOM stuff is later on in the tree, will get rendered very late. Not really good because the data here and here that I request could already be present from the very beginning, right? I could have the data already, and when I enter the screen, I just display it instead of fetching it, waiting for it, and then displaying it. So what I did is I introduced a very, very nice trick. There are app initializers. They return a promise or a static value. And when they are done, when they return a promise, I will wait with the app to bootstrap until they are done and then bootstrap it. And when they will return a synchronous value, I will just bootstrap it and fire that as a side effect. So what I did is I created a tiny service that basically initializes the data at the beginning. And then I added the app, the global state and this fetch, this initial fetching as an app initializer. And what happened is this. In gray, the old fetches present or were present here and here, as you can see. What I did, I moved them to the very beginning. And with this one-liner, it was really a one-liner in the code, I was able to make my first dramatic improvement in render time. Because imagine you have the data and you just display it, instead of having a full server round trip in between. Okay, one-liner, huge improvement. Let's go to the next one because we don't have time. Another thing, we already reduced the work with on push. We also reduced the work by not loading stuff if they are not in the screen, and by loading the important stuff first and the not so important stuff last. But if we look at this one huge task here, we are basically at the limit of the knowledge, of the previous knowledge, because this is one huge task and we cannot really prioritize this work because it is the bootstrapping of the app itself. So if this is not happening, it is just not happening at all, nothing, we don't see it. And pretty much any performance engineer that tries to improve the bootstrap time, may it be of a Next.js app at scale or an Angular or whatever app at scale, they stop here and they say, no, we cannot do anything. So I thought it is a very nice use case to demonstrate what you can do here, because you always can do stuff, and I will show you what I figured out what we can do. So the first thing is, before I just do anything, I try to get a plan, right? I do my analysis work. And when I look in the flames, I basically see 4 well-known chapters here or blocks in Angular. I have the Webpack bootstrap phase. I'm not sure if you can improve a lot of stuff there, but let's take a look at that one later. And then I have the very well-known stuff that I have right in my hands, the Angular code, the Angular bootstrap call, the app initializer call that I mentioned before, and the router call. And the rest is then all the rest of your application. So how can we tackle that? The first thing that I do is I started to try to disconnect the Webpack stuff that I cannot touch that easily from the Angular stuff. And the first hook into that stuff for me was the bootstrap method. And I look at it, so here on the left, we have the Webpack stuff, on the right, we have the Angular stuff, and I just figured out where all that stuff started. So where does it start? In our main TS file, and there is the platform browser dynamic Bootstrap module, and then we have the app module. And I guess you know that line very well, right? So what I did is I added, maybe I should say this is the talk of one-liners, I added a one-liner. I wrapped this function, and if you detect, analyze the flames, you will realize this is a promise. It's a synchronous code that will unfortunately execute in the same browser tick. Therefore, it is a huge thing. And I wrapped it with a set timeout 0. And what I do is I will just chunk up that work with 0 delay, just schedule it in the next task. Let's have a look what happens. What happens is, instead of having one big task, I have now 2 big tasks. 2 big tasks that are half the size. But if you remember definition of a long task, everything that is longer than 50 milliseconds, I'm not only having interactivity now in between for my mouse, my user interaction, my whatever, I, in top of it, and this is huge for the one-liner, earned 50-second reductions, 50 milliseconds, reductions of total blocking time. Beat it with a one-liner. Next one. You remember the App Initializer, right? So I looked it up where it is in the flame chart, and I figured it out after the bootstrapping, which is here on the left. There is an initial navigation. Not App Initializer, initial app navigation. So here in this initial navigation, we basically trigger the router and say, now render me the main content, bootstrap all the components there, and do it right away. And this, again, if you have a look, happens in the same task. Have a look here, run microtask. It is, as unfortunately it is in a promise, it happens all in the same task. Very bad. What did I do? Now it's not a one-liner, it is a two-liner, but one of those lines is just configuration. So I go to the router and I say initial navigation disabled, right? So don't navigate, just don't. And then I went into my app, component app, the first place where I have my first router outlet, and I started my navigation there. This is pretty common because we all do that after we logged in or after we checked the stuff that we need before the navigation. In my case, I don't check anything. I just wrap that call with a set timeout. Set timeout, again, a scheduling API. You can use any other. I mean, if you want to be really, really good, you use the post message API because this is like more aggressive, but set timeout is fine. It will split it up, schedule the work into a second task. And again, we earned 50 milliseconds of total blocking time reduction with a one-liner and configuring the router. Next trick. Schedule app initializers, a little bit more tricky, but a really nice one. I really like this. You remember app initializers return a promise. You will wait as long as this promise is resolved, and then you do the rest of your application. And we already know promises will execute in the same task. So whatever you do in promises, it will just make this one task longer and longer and longer. Unfortunately, but if you know that fact, then you dig into the flames and you figure out if it could be a good hook. And indeed, it is a really, really nice hook to split up another chunk of work. I will hook in the run initializer section, and you already saw before my app initializer stuff. So now I added another app initializer with another one-liner, and guess what? Another time I use set timeout. I know, now it starts. Just kidding. Set timeout is just the easiest and easiest to understand for people compared to other scheduling techniques. So I take the promise because I have to, otherwise it is synchronous, and I don't want this. And asynchronous, the only thing that I can do is use a promise. But in the promise, I can resolve it after I schedule the set timeout. And then with this trick, I can chunk out another block of this huge initial block, and I earn on top of that earlier interactivity another 50 milliseconds total blocking time reduction. Really nice. A quick recap. Look at this. There is no red stuff on the right. It is beautiful. And on the left, we have Webpack. There is a lot of time for Zone.js, but maybe at the moment it is too much of a big refactoring to make the full app zoneless. So let's not focus on Zone for now. And let's go on to the next chapter, state and template. And I can tell you, after those 5 one-liners, the biggest bottleneck in your app, because lazy loading and preloading, everything is done, will be the change detection itself and the template evaluation. Let's look at this tiny tree, and I will show you what people do normally, what a common assumption is, and what you can do in comparison to that. So what we look is, we look at a component tree. You remembered it's this tree structure from before, and we have these red triangles. Change detection on push is applied everywhere. And what we see here is the picture of the initial rendering of the application. So we render it the first time. And obviously, everything needs to be rendered the first time. So there is a lot of work, but no bad work. And you see, I render everything with the async pipe, and I pass my value to the input binding of the child, and then I take it again, use the async pipe, pass it to input binding of a child, and at some point it ends up in the age component here at 5, and I really re-render the component. If I just update it, and this is what I already told you, we have this yellow dirty path just because I only want to update this one single thing. If we would directly use the service in the component with an async pipe, we would also see that pattern, because the async pipe runs dirty marking from wherever it is, right? But in this example, we really pass it through the input bindings. And as we change the value through all input binding, this is more or less a legit evaluation. But still, I say it's yellow. It's too much. We can do better. So what did I do 2 years ago? I said, like, this is pretty slow. We have to get that faster. And I will slightly adopt the architecture. Instead of using the async pipe, now look at the code snippet here. I go back. Instead of using the async pipe to subscribe to it, do dirty marking from bottom to top, pass the value, and then trigger change detection, and then pass it again, and then trigger change again. It's a lot of work. I just pass the observable directly. It looks spooky, and many of us don't know how to deal with that when I receive the observable and how to subscribe and memory leaks and whatever. I show you it's a one-liner again. And now have another thought. What happens is I pass the observable instance there. It will evaluate it one time. And every value that I pass through this observable channel will not trigger change detection, because the observable is still the same. So I now can open up a channel that is independent from Angular's slow change detection and can shoot a value, for example, to component H and to component H's template. And in the component H's template, I use the async pipe again. And as you know, the async pipe does this dirty marking. So from bottom to top, it draws everything red, and then I have to re-render again. So slow. But 2 years ago, I shipped the push pipe. The push pipe was the first concept of running local change detection. The concept of really like explicit change detection for component number H here. And if you look at it, there is way less work. There is just this one single component left that we render. But I tell you, still, it's too much. We can do better. So passing observables, no input, no on push. We have this channel of shooting values directly to this H component. And then the push pipe will only evaluate this component, but there's a difference. So what we did right after the push pipe, we worked on directives. Why did we work on directives so hard? And it took us really long time to implement that stuff, because in our research, we figured out the following things. A template in a component is created by a few container ref. A structural directive, for example, also owns a view container ref. And the structural directive takes a template, maintains it over a view container ref, and uses it over a so-called embedded view to display that. With that knowledge, and I guess you remember the component tree from before, I zoom in into one component here. We have double curly braces for a template binding. We have two directives, an ng-for and an ng-if. And if I zoom even closer, like I really zoom in with the microscope and end up in a way closer and more detailed thing, I see that the component structure, the structural directives own this view container ref, and the embedded views are placed here, and they internally maintain a method that is called detect changes. Embedded view detect changes, and when we read that in the source code, it clicked. Because the push pipe is using the change detector ref of the component, and if I call detect changes there, the whole component reevaluates all the different bindings in the template, and the whole component gets redrawn, even if I only want to reevaluate this one ng-if or whatever it is. So, if we could somehow shoot a value directly to a structural directive, and we already know that we can do that by passing observables directly, right? It will not evaluate anything because the observable stays the same. Then, when we receive that and we are able to schedule, and not do it synchronously, but schedule this one method here, embedded view, detect changes, then we can end up, and here I don't use the push pipe, I use the rxlet, the second thing that we shipped, a directive. Then I'm able to only render the stuff that I really need. This is the biggest and drastic performance improvement you can introduce to your application. Believe me, this is huge. It will feel a lot more fluent, and especially frequently changing data or navigation will be with a completely different feeling if you just see to place them correctly and pass the values correctly. And this is, as you saw, not really hard. I compared all of the architectures. I measured all of the architectures here. Definitely my suggestion, go with passing observables directly and the rxlet or any other structural directive. And I will show you how cool it is that you not only get performance out of it, but you will also benefit from way more cleaner templates. I'll jump into my movie list, and what people normally do in a template is they use the async pipe here to extract from an object the main and the sub heading. Sorry for my coughing. What I do is I say, well, instead of also reevaluating all the movies here and all the loading spinners here, I will apply it to an rxlet, and then I will pass this heading basically here, and I will say take that value and store it under the variable heading, and I could get rid of the async pipe here. And now something cool. And as we are lazy and we know when values arrive and when not, we can strictly type. Look at this. I can remove all the question marks now in my template, because I know if this will get evaluated, the value is here. I cannot do that with an async pipe, and you can test it in your application. Angular will just accept it. If you use the async pipe, it will throw errors. If you use the rxlet, it will accept it because it is strongly typed. Here I will change that stuff. I will reduce it past the observable directly. Here, ng-if, I could use another structural directive that we shipped, the rxif. I could remove the async pipe. Now I just not only remove the async pipe, but I only evaluate this tiny snippet, not the list. I jump in the list. And in the list, we have the ng-for and the movies and the async pipe again, so many async pipes, and I will just remove it. And I will add two more characters, rx. So now, it is also only re-rendering when it is really done. Another replacement here, instead of the ngIf hack, for example, this is what people do a lot. They use ngIf to just bind the observable under a value here. So I would suggest to use the rxlet again, rxlet, and we can just delete this. And it will work, and I can reduce all my question marks everywhere, and so on and so forth, and all the others. Here is another async pipe, okay. And I will use the rx4 again. And now I believe I'm done with refactoring, and I removed basically all the async pipes in the code. Like all async pipes are gone now. I will prove that by just search for async, and there is one more left, but I have anyway, I will not change the rest too. I will just check it out, and then we can see that with that change and all async pipes gone, I reduced the template a lot. I have no question marks again, and with another measurement we will realize that our app now magically is 10 times faster, because the rendering of all the templates, and I will do a reboot here. Sorry, I will do it not in with the sidebar open so that we can see that. I'll refresh it again. Let's delete it, refresh it. It reboots. I'll stop it. We see a lot of chunks here, all tiny pieces, and if I hover over that, we see that they are related to the list, and they basically take that template that is now full of rxlet, rx4, and rx whatever, and render it step by step in separate chunks, because they schedule detect changes and they don't do it synchronously. Of course, there are some parts that are not super optimized, but I can go there, add another rxlet there. This is another list rendering here. If I add another rx4 there, it would also be gone. But if we look at these ticks here, look, the sidebar renders first and then the movie, which is not really cool. So I could make a priority. I can say the middle part of the application has a higher priority than the side part of that application. I will refresh quickly. So here we have the same scenario. The sidebar menu renders first. What I will do, I will go into our application. As RX Angular is built with performance in mind, I can just go to the side menu. Help me, demo gods, to find that RX4 now. And here is the side menu, and I say, this is not as important as the list that is rendered in the main page section. So I apply another strategy, and this strategy is called low. So I want to render all that sidebar items with a lower priority. A really fancy trick. Let's hope that it works. And I show you that here is the side menu. Tuck, it kicks in, and then the main content page. If I now refresh and I stop that and I do it again, we see no side menu, the first, second, third image, and then tuck the side menu. You saw that. This was 3 characters or 5, I don't know. We can count the characters. Let's say it was 10 characters, but do that in your application with 10 characters. We basically moved the largest content for Paint again, way earlier. So a lot of stuff, we optimized it completely. We are happy with it. We did even more, but then we look at this first chunk here and we realize that Zone.js, this terrible library, is taking up more than half of all the time just by using it. So we said, like, if we write this performance library that is super easy to use and that also reduces your code base, so you don't really need to only use it for performance, you can also just have a nicer and cleaner code base, We can also make it zone agnostic. What does mean zone agnostic? Zone agnostic means we don't care if you use zone or not. This specific template part that you render with any of our directives doesn't care about the zone or not zone. It will work independently. And if this is true, and I don't have any other async pipe left in my application, and I proved it by searching that, or basically checking out this one here, I can remove zone. And how do I do that? I go into my polyfills and I basically comment out zone.js, so I will not have 300 kilobytes in my bundle. The next thing that I can do is I can tell Angular that don't use this crazy zone instance to always detect whatever you detect in the background. Just use a no operation mock of that service. And then your app will stop working, right? You will just see a white screen as I do here. If my application re-renders, this screen, if it re-renders finally, will be white, right? Like this, boring. Sad. And this is the reason because routing is not working. So let me quickly fix routing whenever somebody, and I will just quickly comment that out. I made a really small service. Where is the character here? Pump. And this really small service is the router service that I initialize. And what does the router service do? It basically listens on the router events, and whenever the navigation end fires, I run application ref tick. You can also take the component that owns the router outlet and call component change detector ref.detect changes. Also a thing, I just wanted to have it in a one-liner on a central place in the app, therefore I did it in this way. This was not a one-liner. I had to comment out for one line true. I had to implement the main TS one line true, but this is definitely not a one-liner. This is a two-liner or a five-liner. If I refactor it and be really hacky, I can make a five-liner out of it. So it doesn't fulfill the one-liner stuff, but hey, let's check that out. Or I don't need to check it out. I just commented in everything. It should work. Let me go back. Let's refresh. Come on. Babam. There we go. A fully zoneless app. It is beautiful. I will refresh. Let me do the popular and refresh here and stop that one on the side. Refresh. Here we go. I stopped that recording so that I can save your time because I believe I'm over time now. And if I zoom in, it is still a little bit big, but we don't have the timing marks and zone here. And everything else also looks pretty smooth. A little bit more polishing. And I would end up basically in the 99 of performance. Here you see before and after. Here you see the timing marks, blah, blah, blah. How you do that. Before and after 99, 100, 100, 100. I would say that's beautiful. You saw how little code you need to change, and as a bonus, how less code you need to write. I did not show Rx state, but this was too much. It was just about performance. Go online if you liked it. Star our repository, sponsor us. Our open source work would be even cooler. And that's it from my end. Thanks for listening for so long, and hopefully see you very soon on the next Angular meetup in person. And for that one, we are very excited. And that's it. Now I jump back to the video recording. Cool. I did not collect the time, but I guess it was more or less okay-ish. Luba, what do you say?
I think it was perfect.
You're always so positive.
It was informative. I think that's the point. So you did that part. Sometimes you need more time for more information, but it was good information. So thank you, Michael. And I think there was one question for you, Madalena, and one question for Michael. Mugato is asking, do you have a blog with this useful information? And of course you do.
I think
To
that one was
Michael?
for you, Michael.
Michael,
For me,
yeah.
most of the stuff I published, the slides are published since the NGBE conference, and I will ship my own blog post that is not hosted somewhere else, but on my own, and pretty soon.
Thank you. And there's one question from Madlena from Mahtabi. Any in change detection? Any improvements in change detection?
Not for V14. It is something we're aware of that at some point in time we'll have to take a closer look at change detection, but we haven't had the capacity to take it on for V14. So I don't know when that might be, and so I don't want to give false promises or false hope. But I think as Michael's talk showed as well, there's definitely a lot of things around change detection that is hard to get right and really do well performance. And so we know that it is on our list of eventually to look at.
Sounds good. Thank you. So thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Angular World. Thank you, our speakers. Thank you, everyone. If you guys enjoyed this event, stay tuned because Angular Vienna Meetup will be announcing new events coming very soon. So stay tuned. And we hope to see you there. And thank you, everyone, once again.
And thank you for hosting, Luba.
You're welcome. It was very informative. Thank you.
Luba.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.